Well, hello, Wolfpack Nation. Welcome to Ramey's Pregame Pod. Visiting with you Friday night from my hotel room near Spartan Stadium, near San Jose. The Wolfpack and the Spartans getting it on, 4:30 Pacific kickoff. This will drop early Saturday morning, so 4:30 this afternoon. Mike Edwards and me start at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time with the Bud Light Tailgate Show. And we've got two very special conversations for the pregame pod. You'll hear edited versions of these conversations on the Tailgate Show, but these are the full-length conversations. First, I visit with Kevin Richardson, play-by-play voice of the San Jose State Spartans. He was the analyst for several seasons, and he slid over to the play-by-play chair when Justin Allegri left San Jose State to become the voice of the Golden Bears of California. Kevin Richardson also played linebacker at Stanford in the 80s under Jack Elway, and his final game as a college football player was also the first Cal-Stanford game I ever attended as a 10-year-old, the big game. It ended in a 19-19 tie on a blocked field goal at the end of regulation. And my dad was the Stanford broadcaster. I sat in the booth for that game as a 10-year-old. So I have some extremely vivid memories of that game. It was not the first college football game I ever attended, but it was the first college football game in which I sat in the press box with my dad during his broadcast, and it was a thrilling game. And of course, Cal versus Stanford is one of the great rivalries in college sports. So I visited with Kevin about that game, the 1988 big game at Memorial Stadium at Berkeley. We also touched on some common threads from that Stanford coaching staff under Jack Elway. John Elway's dad, the offensive coordinator, was Sonny Lubick, who would go on to become a legendary head coach at Colorado State. And his son, Matt Lubick, of course, is the Wolfpack offensive coordinator this year. We also talked about the San Jose State matchup against the Pack. And then Terrence Newman, our Mountain West insider, returns to Ramey's pregame pod. He talks about the latest round of realignment news, little Heisman chatter, and Ashton Ginty's spectacular start to his season. And Terrence also breaks down the Spartans versus the Wolfpack matchup. First off, here's Kevin Richardson and me taking it back all the way to 1988.
Kevin Richardson, we've discussed this before, but I wanted to make sure that everybody was listening when we revisited the topic. Were you on the 1988 Stanford team that survived a 19-19 tie at Memorial Stadium against Cal, and I believe something like the 80-something big game? Was that you?
Yeah. So to get into the deets of that, right? Troy Taylor, new Stanford coach.
Yeah.
He gets the job. I go introduce myself to him, and I said, hey, Troy Taylor. And he said, yeah, no, you're Kevin Richardson. You were number 46. I remember it well. And I said, I still don't think the hit was late. And the last touchdown that they scored in the game, they're driving. He rolls left. I'm the inside linebacker, just like you and I describe on the radio. He breaks contain. You got to come up, right? So
yeah.
I come up. I'm on my left foot, launching myself at him because that was legal back then. And when he's going to throw, and when I hit him, I'm still on my left foot. And he throws an interception, and the flag goes up. They take the interception away. They get down in the red zone. They run a motion that gets us to switch from a cover 2 to a cover 3. And there's still amongst my friends an argument over who was right. Was it me or was it the safety, Rick Theater, whose dad, by the way, was the head coach at Cal at one point, Roger, right? But anyhow, he catches us in the switch from a 2 to a 3 and just shoots that rail shot in there for the touchdown to tie it up. Yeah. So, yeah, that's the thing. Was it a late hit? I still don't believe it was. I'm glad Troy Taylor is at Stanford. He is one tough competitor, and I was on that team, unfortunately.
So a couple of things. Troy Taylor was previously at Sacramento State, and there's a lot of talk in the chattering classes about Sacramento State. Now they have a new stadium design that's been unveiled as they're debating maybe leveling up and joining the FBS. Also, I was at that game because that was the first big game I ever attended. My dad was the Stanford broadcaster, and so I don't remember the exact late hit. I was only 10, so you're all right. But of course, I remember freshman Twan Van Lee of De La Salle High School blocking. Was it Robbie Keane's field goal?
Yeah, I believe it was Robbie Keane.
Yeah.
I know it was Twan because I'm kneeled down on the sideline with your helmet off, just going, "This is how it ends," because I knew it was my last game at Stanford. And on the late hit, they pull me out. And at that point, you're what, 22, 23 years old, fifth year senior. And I remember saying to Larry Kerr with some words around it, but like, you pulled me out of the last game of my life to yell at me about that. And I turned around and ran right back in the game and pulled the freshman out that they sent in. So
That's funny.
And then
Troy
Taylor, to go further on that, the first series. So, remember, because the previous year he didn't play because he was injured. And then the year before that, he was injured. So he'd missed consecutive big games. And that first drive, Ray Huckstein, who was a nose guard from Pennsylvania, gets a shot on him where you don't think you're going to get the shot. He's coming off of like they're running a twist. He doesn't even see Troy. Troy doesn't see him. Those are the big hits. And then Lester Archambault, who went on and played a lot of years in the NFL, he had the same kind of hit on him. And we were in the huddle, because back then you would huddle, and we were saying, like, we've got him. One more, and this guy's going to stay down. And if you watch the video of it, I mean, he's, hands on the knees, hanging on. And, he's so tough. He got him down there, and they got a field goal. But we almost had him on the mat. That would have been a much better day for us had that happened. That's for sure.
Yeah, that result was tough. 19-19 tie. I recall your second tie of the year.
Yes.
And then I also remember there was a kickoff. Was it the opening kickoff of the second half was returned by Stanford for a touchdown? Do I have that right? Or was it a punt
that's
return?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Was it Kevin Scott maybe?
Yeah. Kevin, God, that is a great pull. Right. And then which is funny because those windows that you remember things as a broadcaster versus fan versus player, you're not on the kickoff team, kickoff return because you're playing. So you don't see it, therefore you don't remember it as well. But you're exactly right. Yeah, K. Scott. Yeah, he got it done.
Well, I love when we visit because that again, I was 10 years old. It was the first big game I'd ever attended. I was pulling for Stanford, your team, but it was in Cal Memorial Stadium, a beautiful place to watch a game. And Troy Taylor was a Cal quarterback, so we're all kind of still living with ties to that very odd 1919 tie from 1988.
And then your dad's voice, like that, just like that's there are two voices that are college football to me, and that it's him and a guy named George Pavlitich, who used to do the Bakersfield College Renegades, junior college in Bakersfield, and he'd done that forever. I grew up with one of his sons, and man, I would tune into him on the AM radio on a Saturday night, going, God, that guy just paints the picture. And so those are the guys when I think about college broadcasters. I don't care about Herb Street and those guys. Yeah, give me some Ramey, give me some Pavlitich. Yeah,
that's really
that is
Thank
pure
you.
right there for me.
I got one other tie. Sonny Lubick was the offensive coordinator for Jack Elway and Stanford in 1988, and his son Matt is Nevada's offensive coordinator this year under first-year head coach Jeff Choate.
Yeah, so Sonny Lubick, just the greatest guy in the world. Had all these funny sayings, right? Some appropriate for radio, some not. And he rolled in, and I remember the first spring practice he was at. And you're out there, and back then it was, we were cutting edge because you took your helmet off to warm up. Well, that's, soft, right? Back in, whatever it was, 86, 87-ish, right? When Sonny rolled in there. And Sonny comes over and he's got a big, red man chew going, right? And he kind of spits, and then he looks at me and he says, I know the kind of guy you are, right? And I'd never met this guy, right? And I'm just thinking, man, what's next, right? Because clearly he wasn't pointing out that I was a great student at Stanford. And he says, and then he kind of walks around. He says, you're the kind of guy that likes football. He's like, you don't give up a rep ever because you like to just play football. And he spits again, right? And I'm kind of laughing, because it was so the case. And then he says, and I've watched film. You need to give up some reps. You play hard. And he's like, that'll help you late in the year. We got to do that this next year. And then he spits again, right? And then he says, he kind of starts to leave. Then he comes back and he said, and then you drive that brown Chevy pickup. And he goes, you reach into that ashtray, and he's working his finger around, and he says, you find a quarter, dime, couple of nickels, and he goes, and you buy a cool one for the ride home, don't you? And everybody around me is just cracking up, and I'm like, well, yeah, that might happen once in a while. And he said, I like these kind of football players. You and I are going to get along well. But yeah, what a great guy. I mean, weighing in, I had literally never spoken with him, and he had gone through all the film, and he was exactly right. Because my junior year, I had 45 tackles 3 games in, leading the then Pac-10, and just couldn't hold pace because I just was worn out and would never give up a rep because you felt like you were going to lose your job. But yeah, super, super wise. And then I remember when he went to Miami, and he learned that 4-3 defense and got that thing going, and then just spun that into pure gold with the Rams. Super guy. And then I remember Matt playing catch, at many a road trip when the quote the kids would come along, and Buck Rogeman, who is doing color with me for San Jose State, he and a guy named Jason Fisk, they're job sharing, as we call it, right, in this new world that we live in. But Buck saw that in the notes, and Buck's an old English major and reads everything. And next thing I know, I've got War and Peace, this note that he wants to take over to Coach Lubick and put in the coach's box on Saturday. I'm like, I love your idea, but we want him to read it before the game, so shorten it up, and he did.
Trim it down.
Yeah, explaining, hey, we're happy that you're healthy and going in the right direction, and know that your dad was just a huge influence on us, and we enjoyed playing for him. And I had called Sonny when he went to work for the bank because I knew how to get a hold of him. Therefore, he was at the bank. This is pre-COVID, and he picks up the phone and he asks, do you still have that brown pickup? So I don't know how the guy remembers that stuff.
That's great.
And I guess he's what, high school buddies with Evel Knievel?
I didn't know that.
How good is that? I mean, that's the best.
That's
stuff
beautiful
right there. So, yeah, just a super guy. God, thanks for asking those questions. Those are some great memories. And one of those coaches that, while I didn't play directly for him, he was a defensive coach, really had an influence in terms of how you see the game.
Let's talk about the Spartans, this year's Spartans. And I'm going to ask you about another coach, Coach Ken Niumatalolo, who had such a brilliant 15-year run at Navy, and his ascension to the head coaching job there, really interesting. He played quarterback at Hawaii, was an assistant at Hawaii, a GA and an assistant, was an assistant at UNLV, and then was the offensive line coach at Navy, and eventually the interim head coach, and then goes on the great 15-year run. Then he spent a season last year in an administrative role with UCLA football, I believe.
Right.
And now he's got the Spartans 3-1. How has what is his presence and his program like?
Well, you obviously had this thing gamed out because we started in the late 80s, and we're talking about Niumatalolo, late 80s, early 90s guy, went on his mission. And there's two things I would say about Coach Niumatalolo. One, you remember the quote old days when we could call and make an appointment to talk to a head coach in a pregame during the week and record, 5-10 minutes, something reasonable. And the 4 times San Jose played Navy, obviously it was me doing color with Justin Allegri, who's up with the Cal Golden Bears. And I always had this trick. I'd say, Coach, the recorder's not on. And then I'd have a really thoughtful question or statement like you had for me that would, trigger a guy and get him talking. And it always proved out that the guys that embraced that question and gave you a thoughtful answer ended up being really good coaches. And the ones that didn't, you were like, man, that guy, he wasn't special. And it would play out that way. He was that guy that answered those questions in a real, like, fun, like you and I just, talking about football. So I was positive on that when he got the job. The part that scared me was, I mean, I'm an 80s and 90s guy. I feel a little obsolete sometimes, right? As my buddy Eric Volta says, people look at us like we did those guys that played in the 50s, and that hurts. But you watch him come in, name, image, and likeness running wild throughout college football. San Jose not in a place to capitalize on that. Brent Brennan, well liked. I guess we use the word players coach. He's moved on. Kids hitting the portal, a lot of talent hitting the portal. And then that's the thing that's amazing for me, like a whole other discussion, is, the portal's pretty darn efficient while it's offensive at times and upsetting, but a kid that can play power five, they're out. The kid that can't, well, he's going to slide down. And you're watching this unfold and knowing that, hey, they're going to run a run and shoot type offense, going to throw the ball. They want to be able to run it efficiently. Haven't done that well as they want to. But that thing starts to come together, and we go do this first game, and I mentioned Buck Rogeman and Jason Fisk. They come to the first game. Well, they're D linemen, man. I mean, they're just gritty as they come. And after the first couple breaks, you're trying to get up on Sac State. That's a really good FCS team, a la they're trying to step up. And both of them are like, Kevin, are you watching this defense? And I'm like, well, heck yeah, I am. I mean, they're stroking people. And that has been the thing that has really evolved is they just run and hit on defense really, really well. They play super, super tough. They're not big up front at all, but boy, they sure play hard. And if you sub in, it's next man up. And then on offense, the thing that was surprising, Nick Nash isn't surprising, super athlete. You knew he was going to have a great year. There's some eye-popping numbers, obviously, maybe that were surprising. But you look at this quarterback, Emmett Brown, threw 200 balls as a senior in high school. You and I both know the dudes that were dealing it. Like you've got a Purdy guy on your roster. He threw 400 as a sophomore, 400 balls as a junior, 400 as a senior in high school, right? So you're thinking, man, as a guy that's had that few reps, can he evolve quick enough? He clearly throws a good enough ball. And what we've learned is you've been to those kind of practices because of the previous staff you had. I mean, it looks like a circus on offense. They're throwing the ball so much. So how did he get there? Blocking, tackling, being real up front with the kids. We'll coach you hard. We'll give you a place to go to school. We'll treat you well. The facilities are nice. They're not spectacular. And they're tough. I mean, to just use a Sonny Lubick term, I mean, they're just tougher than hell. I mean, they just play hard. And that was a pretty long answer on some real basic stuff, but they block, they tackle, they throw, they catch. And it's been as much fun as I've had in the 17 years I've been around. Really, really fun to watch.
How important was it that Derek Odom, the defensive coordinator, stayed with the Spartans rather than going with Brent Brennan to Arizona?
I think that was a huge part of the success early on. And then it also feels like with Niumatalolo, that was kind of that one last little thing that Derek Odom needed to become. I mean, I don't sound corny and say elite, but boy, he's a great D coordinator. Like he doesn't get married to one thing. He does what works well for the kids. The kids love playing for him. I mean, I'm looking at a number, they've got 8 interceptions in 4 games. I mean, that's going and getting the ball. You're coaching that at that point. That's not just dumb luck. And I know against Sac State, things went bad early. First 2 drives on offense were horrible. And Niumatalolo pulled everybody together. And, the rumor was he was just like, hey, if you guys don't like it, go play harder. Right. And they're able to do that. So the personality is really different when things go against them. Washington State, they turn the ball over. San Jose does. Washington State's got a good shot to go down and score. San Jose actually fumbled the kickoff, and defense goes out, gets the stop. They run the kicking unit out, run a fake kick. Not only did we stop the fake kick, we got 5 guys on top of the kicker, which was their only kicker, which was kind of odd for Washington State to do that, I thought. But I just thought that spoke volumes about how that team, like, okay, it didn't go well. Now we got to go even harder. And that's just maybe that's an 80s and 90s things. But yeah, that's Ken Niumatalolo delivering that. Really, really kind of special and fun to watch.
We talked about Nash, who's got 50 receptions, right? Having a great year and top 5 in yards receiving and yards receiving per game. He's first in touchdown receptions. Obviously, Emmett Brown can throw the ball, as you talked about. I keep wanting to come back to the defense. Sowani Atoia, the nose guard. Like, this is what, the third absolute stud defensive lineman in the last 5 years?
Yeah.
What's going on? I mean, I've followed the Spartans for a while now. I don't often think like, defensive line or nose tackle you, right?
Yeah. No, that is a great point. And then
and I'm going to interrupt. And where does Toia kind of fit in with Kafoko and the other guys as far as, because we've seen some dominant performances in that position from you.
Yeah. So Iani is much more of an interior guy, not as rangy. I got it in on the call up at Washington State, and of course I got Jason Fisk sitting next to me, the 12-year NFL vet, who's just, his world is between the tackles. We were trying to talk about the onside kick, and we went to the break. I said, I have to remember, Jason, you were always a starter. You never played special teams. For me, right, that was how I made a living for a lot of years in college. But their play happens, Soyani stuffs it, and then he gets up, and the O lineman's standing there, and he reaches out and shakes his hand as if to say, "Hey, that was great. Let's do it again." He's just really physical, stays on his feet really, really well. And the one thing they all do is just play hard. They just run to the ball. And as Buck Rogman always says during the radio broadcast, when you run to the ball, only good things happen. And that's what really is going on. They'll sub 3 at a time, hockey sub in, and there's not a lot of drop off, and you're able to get guys recovered and get going. And then the 2 inside linebackers, in my mind, are super special. They can run, they can hit, they can cover man to man. That helps a bunch.
That's Cobbs and Pollard.
Yeah, they can really go. Probably the only worry I have is, can you hold pace? Right, when you're getting double-digit tackles every week. I always love throwing that out during the broadcast. You've got to try it on yours, but is it harder to get 1,000 yards rushing or 100 tackles in a season?
Boy, that's a great question.
Right?
Or more, which takes more effort?
Yeah. So I always lean, having been a defensive guy, obviously,
sure,
but I always think 100 tackles, just because you can't coast, right? It's every one of them is a tackle, but also I've never run the football and had 11 guys chasing me either, but who knows, right?
He's Kevin Richardson, former Stanford linebacker, play-by-play voice of the San Jose State Spartans. Terrence Newman, Mountain West insider, joining the pod now. Terrence and I discussed who's in on realignment for the Mountain West, who's not, who's plan A, who is maybe plan B or C. We talk about the Heisman race and one outstanding star in the Mountain West, who Terrence believes should be a finalist if he maintains his current torrid pace. And finally, we break down the matchup between Nevada and San Jose State. Here's Mountain West insider Terrence Newman. Plunging into Mountain West play, the Wolfpack at 2-3, facing a San Jose State team in San Jose that is already 1-0 in conference, has a win at Air Force. Spartans 3-1 overall. We'll get to the matchup, but first, let's talk latest realignment. It's funny, being a college football fan. It's almost like reporting on the economy or Wall Street or something. We're always talking about what stock is up, what stock is down, what news is good for which brand.
Yeah, it's
We're talking
constantly
about,
constantly free agency.
yeah.
It's
So
like it's free agent season all year long.
it's wild. I feel like I'm a CNBC reporter half the time.
Yeah, no, here's the thing. One day the carousel will stop, but I still think we're like in the middle of the song, you know? The carousel still got a few more rotations left to go until we've reached our final form.
So the rumors we heard were, or the reporting indicated, Texas State was on the fence and then said no thank you to the Mountain West. And UTEP said, yes, we will join. And there's also talk right now about Hawaii joining as a full member. Right now, the Rainbow Warriors are football only. If Hawaii joins, then that would get the Mountain West up to 8 full-time members, including UTEP. And Hawaii, of course, has baseball, both basketball. So that would be helpful in the conference picture. But I know you want to focus on UTEP versus New Mexico State, who has been perhaps conspicuously absent from the discussions regarding who's going to join the Mountain West.
Yeah. I think, well, first off, I think Texas State was the number one target.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was definitely the first name on the board they were going after. It seems like Texas State's gonna try to play the long game here because the Pac-12 is obviously not done. It looks like the Pac-12 probably gonna, after they add Gonzaga, maybe add a few other basketball only schools on the West Coast, and it seems like they're gonna probably try to go back and see if they can work out a deal again with those American teams. So I think Texas State is probably sitting there thinking, well, if a few of these American schools end up leaving, we're next in line to slot right back into that conference. So that might be one of those names where I don't know if they're out of it yet for the Mountain West, but it's a few dominoes have to fall first before they're going to make that decision. So I think as soon as that got put on the back burner, UTEP was the next option on the board. I think the goal would have been 2 teams from Texas, but they at least got one. I mean, it's a natural fit. Geographically, it's a natural fit. Even from the point of like football tradition, college football history, UTEP belongs with the schools that used to be in the WAC. It's just a natural fit. So this is for the first time a realignment move that actually makes sense. Yeah, I think it was a great move by the Mountain West Conference and Gloria Nevarez. We talked about it last week. We said the first thing they had to do was solidify the teams that they had. And then we said the first thing they should do was go out and get UTEP and New Mexico State just to, stabilize the conference and get those numbers back up. I don't think it's over for New Mexico State. I just think in the phases and levels of this realignment carousel, they're probably more in like the third phase. Like with Texas State, a few more dominoes are going to have to fall for them.
Is it uncharitable to say there may be plan C for the Mountain West?
No, actually, I think that's the perfect way to describe it. It's
plan
you're
B
doubling
minus.
down. UTEP and New Mexico State are basically the same market.
It's the Rio
they're just
Grande,
on different
West
sides
Texas,
of the border. So you're doubling down on the same media market. So it's like you already got that media market secured right now with UTEP. So I think right now you're probably going to look to try to lock something else up, maybe something on the West Coast, a little more farther west, maybe a school like Sacramento State, maybe another school in Texas, if you could. And then after those dominoes start to fill out, New Mexico State would be that third phase where you're just trying to round your numbers out. So I think there is still a chance for them, though.
Sacramento State released stadium renderings. Of course, stadium renderings. I guess you could pave every street in America with stadium renderings versus stadia built. But the Hornets their athletics department released renderings of a new FBS ready facility this week. And I have to say, just judging on what it is, which is a fictitious artistic rendering. It looked pretty exciting. And it does seem as though Sacramento State is really going to entertain this leap up to the FBS level.
They're putting all the feelers out there. They're letting it be known that they want this. They're like they're like a recently single person putting out a bunch of thirst traps on Instagram. They're letting the world know that they are single and ready to mingle. You hear a lot of talk about the Pac-12 for them. I think that's just them shooting for the moon, and hoping to land on a star. I don't see the Pac-12 pulling up a team all the way from the FCS to FBS to their league. If they wanted a team somewhat in that market, they probably would have gone after San Jose State. So I don't blame them at all for their talk of wanting to get to the Pac-12. That should be, they should have high goals like that. But realistically, it's looking like they're going to be a perfect fit, a perfect marriage with the Mountain West.
Any other thoughts? And again, this will probably change as dominoes fall, to use your metaphor. Any other thoughts about realignment for this week heading into Saturday, October 5th with Nevada at San Jose State?
Well, we talked about wanting a second Texas school.
Oh, yeah.
So I do think they do want to keep that door open for Texas State. But if it does seem like Texas State is going to stay in the Sun Belt or maybe go to the American or maybe even the Pac, schools like Sam Houston and school in the FCS, Tarleton State, is getting a lot of buzz. But then also don't count out the Dakotas and the Montanas too.
I would love Hawaii as a full-time member, of course, because I also cover basketball and baseball. And I have had the privilege of covering basketball games in Hawaii because, of course, the Rainbow Warriors are in the Big West currently for basketball and baseball. And I traveled there with UC Riverside basketball. Also, Nevada played there last year. So I've been to the Stan Sheriff Center many times. It's a great basketball environment, also a great volleyball environment. I have never called a baseball game in Honolulu, but they have a great, if not super new, but a legit professional caliber baseball facility. So personally, I am rooting for Hawaii to join because that's not one football trip every other year, which is nothing to sneeze at. We love that, but
a few more paid trips to Hawaii, we're not going to say no to.
I mean, I have to say, anytime, and you know this working in show business, Terrence, anytime you start to think about, oh, this gig isn't all it's cracked up to be, I start reflecting on the number of times I've been paid to travel to Honolulu. And that number is about in double digits now. And that's like, I'm not trying to flex.
That's a good flex though.
But I mean, so whenever I get a little cranky, I remember that, and then I shut the blanket.
That sets the mood straight. Yeah.
You
know what? I honestly, that would be great. I think that's probably going to involve the Mountain West having to pony up a little more money to Hawaii. Just because
that's
it's one thing to send your football team to Wyoming. It's a whole nother thing sending your gymnastics and your women's softball team to Laramie. That's a long trip for the Olympic sports. So that would probably, like we said, that's one of those options on the back burner. But I think they're going to try to, try some other avenues to get that 8th team first.
Again, credit to Commissioner Navarez and the Mountain West, because throughout this whole process, they have accrued and kept options. And that's important in these kind of extended negotiation circumstances.
They've stayed flexible.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little Heisman chatter. There is a Heisman vote in the Ramey family. I don't have it. But unofficially, I suppose I could have lobbying influence.
You could send a text.
I could send a text.
With some suggestions.
Boise State's Ashton Ginty is on pace to come near or even break some of Barry Sanders' galaxy level numbers from 1988 at Oklahoma State in things like rushing yardage for the season and touchdowns for the season. And I saw a comparison of that, and I thought, okay, I knew that Ashton was having a good season, but if we're talking about on pace through 5 weeks,
yeah, we're talking
to match or equal Barry Sanders' Heisman campaign, then this is really something.
Playing on a level few will ever know. This is the highest of the heights. Yeah, no, I think it's time to seriously start talking about Ashton Jeanty as a Heisman finalist. It's kind of like the perfect alignment of the stars, because this is a year where there aren't a lot of standout quarterbacks. Because normally this has become a quarterback award, but this isn't a year where there's like 4 or 5 quarterbacks that are putting up amazing stats on teams that are gonna win their conference. So actually, I think this might be a year where we see maybe only one or even at most 2 quarterbacks that are finalists. I think Travis Hunter will be a finalist.
Sure.
I think Ashton Jeanty will be a finalist. I think we're going to have at least 2 non-quarterback finalists for the Heisman this year. And it feels kind of weird saying that the Mountain West needs to get behind something Boise State's doing, but this is something the Mountain West, they should be promoting Ashton Jeanty as a legit Heisman finalist. It's great publicity for the conference, and honestly, the guy deserves it. You talked about Barry Sanders' stats. So the year Barry Sanders won the Heisman, he had 2,628 yards, 37 touchdowns. So right now, Ashton Jeanty's at 845 yards and 13 TDs through 4 games. That puts him on pace for 2,535 yards and 39 TDs.
So beating his touchdown record.
Yeah, so. And the rushing yards is within distance. It's like, that's just, a few big runs in a game, and he can make up that difference.
Again, I'm sorry, I'm going to defend Barry Sanders a little bit because that 88 campaign was so spectacular, but at least one extra game because the regular season is now minimum 12 games. But it's an astounding pace to start the year.
And I'm not saying he needs to break Barry's record to be a Heisman finalist, but if he's in the stratosphere, if his numbers are this close, I don't see how he cannot be a Heisman finalist. He's the most deserving player on the West Coast right now.
I mean, I if you're talking about, and get it, we're 5 games in, I understand that, but if we're 10 games in, and we're talking about he is again in the neighborhood,
just in the
Barry
neighborhood
Sanders,
to me is good enough.
You
don't need to break it; just in the neighborhood is good enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Because again, Barry Sanders Heisman
is rarefied air.
It's one of the great individual seasons in the history of college football.
And, we don't see it much anymore. But Ashton Jeanty might end up being a first-round draft pick as a running back.
Will the Egg Brains allow a running back to be so highly valued?
Yes, because he can catch the ball. He can put up numbers in the passing game. Some GM, some coach is going to be able to give themselves enough reason to spend a late first-round draft pick on him.
I mean, it'd be hard to argue.
Yeah.
Okay. San Jose State. The Spartans are 3-1. They're 1-0 in the Mountain West. They have a road win at Air Force. Coach Neo Matalolo in his first season has the Spartans playing very physical. They are throwing the ball a lot. They are not running the ball so much. The numbers reflect that. But the physicality on defense is real. Despite Brent Brennan leaving for Arizona, Derek Odom, the defensive coordinator, remained with San Jose State. He is now in his 8th season as the Spartans DC. They have, once again, a ferocious defensive front that has been kind of the hallmark of this recent high water mark for San Jose State football. They're 12-2 in their last 14 home games. Since the COVID-shortened season in which they won the Mountain West, they have been in the upper echelon of the league. They were co-regular season champions last year.
San Jose State is they're putting themselves in position to be one of those schools that to be the upper echelon of the new next generation of the Mountain West. They might be the team I'm most surprised with this year so far. They could very easily be undefeated. They could have easily beaten Washington State.
Yeah, their only loss, what, double overtime, 54 to 52?
Yeah. And I'm really shocked and pleasantly surprised by how this team has been playing. I their coach was at Navy for what, almost
15 years.
Yeah, let's say almost 2 decades, and it was running the triple option. So that's kind of what I expected from them.
But he was a quarterback at Hawaii back in the 80s. And so that's where he has this run and shoot heritage.
It's in his DNA a little bit there. So yeah, I didn't know that. So I expected them to be a little bit more run heavy than they were. But they're really not. And like you said, it really is all about their passing game. For Nevada, they're gonna have to stop Nick Nash. Their wide receiver.
Why isn't he a Heisman candidate? He's got 50 receptions on the year. He's first in the nation in touchdown catches. He's second in the nation in receiving yardage per game. Like, seriously, he's also having. He's an early all Coach Newman team candidate. He's going to be an all Mountain West player.
That's for sure. Has a real good chance to be first team all Mountain West. He's been a real breakout star, I think, of the team so far this year.
I mean, we knew he'd be good, but he has been.
He's taking it up to another level. Yeah, he's definitely taking it up to another level this year. Sophomore quarterback Emmett Brown, didn't really know what to expect from him. Transferred in from Washington State last year. He has just been solid. He's been a really good quarterback this year. 13 TDs, only 4 interceptions. I like the way
a lot of attempts.
Play.
He's throwing the ball. He's almost throwing for 1,300 yards.
He's slinging it all over the field. Yeah, no, I like the way their offense plays. I like the way they attack. They did, like you said, double overtime against Washington State. They can give up some points. I think Kennesaw State and Air Force they kept under 10, but I think Sacramento State got 24 points on them. So that can kind of be their Achilles heel. They can put up some points, but they're also going to give up some points. It'd be interesting to see what sort of wrinkles the Nevada offense has coming off the bye week. The offense looked really good against Eastern Washington. Probably the best they've looked in a couple of years.
Since Jay Norvell left.
Yeah, in a couple of years. So I'm very interested and excited to see what this offense is going to look like against a conference opponent. But if the defense can keep Nick Nash in check, I think that the offense will be able to put up enough points. This should be a good close game going into the fourth.
I think, and you can agree or disagree on this, I think the defense playing well has a lot to do with whether the offense plays keep away, right? Nevada's got to win the time of possession by a sizable margin.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. You know how we do it. It's right. It's at least the 2-headed, possibly a 3-headed running attack. And that's Nevada is just going to have to lean on that. And San Jose State, they're going to throw the ball around. So they're not going to eat up the clock a lot. So you have a chance to really control the clock, keep their offense off the field. Sonatoa, the defensive tackle, senior.
Yeah,
his stats don't pop off.
His
stats don't. You read his stats, they don't pop off the page. But when you watch him play, he just eats up space. He eats up linemen. He gives everybody else free range to work. That's a real key matchup. Him against the interior line of Nevada. If whoever can win that matchup, I think if we can win that, then we can control the ball, control the clock. Then we got a real shot to win this one.
Yeah, that's big 42 for the Spartans. Soane Toia. He is the latest in what has been something of a line of dominant defensive linemen. You think back to Fahoko of recent vintage for the Spartans, and elsewhere on this podcast and on this Bud Light Tailgate show, I spoke with Kevin Richardson, who is the play-by-play voice of the Spartans, and that has been like a late development. You don't think of San Jose State as nose tackle but there have been some real outstanding defensive line performers, and Toia 42 is the latest in that line. And so, I agree. I think that is probably the key matchup of the game, because if Nevada can move 42 out of the way, they can run the ball, which means they can hold the ball, which means that's less time for Emmett Brown to throw it to Nick Nash. And I think that's the only way you go about trying to beat the Spartans team. That, again, they're throwing for 329 yards per game. That's 8th best in the nation. I mean, that's a big time number.
Yeah. Yeah. No, look, they're gonna take their shots and they're gonna complete some passes. Which are gonna, try to limit the big plays, try to make when they do score, make them have to drive the ball, keep the guy in front of you. If they can control the yak, the yards after the catch, if they got to complete 10 passes on a drive to score a touchdown and they got to eat up some clock, that's fine. You can recover from that. What Nevada needs to make sure that they don't give up is the 2-play touchdown drives, the 3-play touchdown drives with the 65-yard touchdown bomb, if they can limit those big plays and control the interior part of the line there, yeah, they got a shot in this one.
Our thanks to Mountain West insider Terrence Newman. Thank you to Kevin Richardson, play-by-play voice of the San Jose State Spartans. This has been Ramey's Pregame Pod. Tune in at 3:30 Pacific time on this fine Saturday. Mike Edwards, the Hall of Famer, and me get started from Spartan Stadium in San Jose. The Wolfpack and the Spartans kick it off at 4:35 p.m. Pacific time. We'll have every snap. You can listen live on 105.7 KOZZ over the terrestrial airwaves in northern Nevada. You can listen live online on the Varsity Network, and you can watch the Behind the Mic cam. Watch us react to the game in the booth and listen to our broadcast at the same time on the official Nevada Wolfpack Facebook page. So however you tune us in, do it. And we look forward to visiting with you from Spartan Stadium later today.